Hey guy, hush for a second and let the day slide off you. Let your breath slow until it feels like rocking, like being carried. Tonight you step into Troy under a star-clean sky, cyclopean stones stacked like sleeping giants, wind whispering through their seams, torchlight warming the road toward the heights. And you probably won't survive this, in the best way. Your stress might finally unclench, and you'll realize you were allowed to rest all along. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and let me know how your day has really been, your worries, your exhaustion, or even a tiny joy that made you smile. I'm here to truly listen and offer the most sincere, heartfelt advice I can. Now turn off the lights. Take a deep, slow breath, let your tiredness melt away, and gently close your eyes. Let's drift together into tonight's dreamlike lands. And tomorrow morning, if you still remember, send me a message and tell me what you dreamed. You walk, and the first thing Troy gives you is scales so enormous it makes your thoughts behave. The cyclopean wall rises ahead, block after block stacked with the unbothered confidence of a mountain. Each stone is the size of a small room, its face rough with softened chisel scars, its edges fitted so tightly you keep staring at the seams, wondering how human hands convinced this much weight to cooperate. The night air is cool and clean, faintly salted as if the sea is breathing from far away. It carries crushed grasses and dry earth, and a thin thread of smoke from fires tucked deeper inside. Above you, stars hold steady, not twinkling so much as refusing to move. A breeze slides along the wall, gathers in the gaps, then slips out again like the city is exhaling through stone. Your footsteps land on a path worn smooth by years of sandals and wheels. Packed earth gives under you with a soft sigh. The slope rises, and you rise with it, the wall growing larger until it becomes a whole horizon of rock. Up close, the blocks wear freckles of lichen, and tiny plants cling stubbornly in crevices, life insisting, even here. Torchlight pools ahead in a sheltered niche where wind can't bully the flame. 2 sentries stand near the bend, still and grounded. Their bronze catches starlight in small, quiet flashes, no theatrical glare, just the practical sheen of something maintained. You don't feel examined so much as contained, as if their calm draws a boundary your body understands immediately. Inside is held, outside is wide. You pass into the first corridor, and the air changes. Stone holds the day's warmth and releases it slowly, so the passage feels gentler than the open plain. The torch flame leans and straightens in a sleepy nod, painting the walls amber and turning every rough surface into soft shadow. Your own shadow stretches beside you like a companion that finally stopped arguing. Troy doesn't reveal itself with grand announcements. It offers you small proofs. A doorway half covered with a woven mat that stirs when someone shifts inside. A cluster of storage jars tucked near a wall, their rounded bellies draped with cloth as if they'd been tucked in for the night. A narrow gutter line cut along the lane to guide rainwater away. Tiny systems, quietly doing their jobs. You slow until your pace matches the city's breathing. Somewhere a donkey shifts its weight, wood creaks once, then settles. Somewhere a dog's nails click lightly on packed earth, then stop. Even these sounds feel careful, as if the whole place has learned that sleep is a resource worth protecting. A small open pocket appears where the ground has been swept clean. A shallow basin sits near the edge, water dark as ink, reflecting torchlight in trembling ribbons. You lean slightly and see your face blur in the ripples, features softened by shadow, eyes gentle by night. For a moment you look like someone who might rest without bargaining first. In a recess nearby, a low shrine waits without drama, a shallow bowl blackened with soot, pale ash gathered inside, and a faint glint of oil along stone. The scent is thin, old smoke, resin, the ghost of burned herbs, but it steadies you. You don't touch anything. You simply breathe once, slow and deep, and let the hush remind your nervous system that fear can sit down for a minute. The lane bends, narrows, then opens again, guiding you upward through terraces and darker shapes. Houses here are modest compared to the wall that holds them, and that contrast teaches you something simple. People live small inside enormous safety. They sweep, they cook, they mend, they carry water, and the walls stand there like an older sibling who doesn't talk much but would absolutely catch you if you fell. You brush your fingertips against the wall once more. Cool, gritty, patient. It doesn't care about your unread messages or your spiraling forecasts. It just stands. Annoyingly effective. Ahead, the city rises toward higher ground, toward the route that will lead you to the Scaean Heights and their wide, wind-washed view. You don't rush. You let anticipation stay gentle, like torchlight. You take one more slow step into Troy's warmth, and you keep walking, deeper and calmer, as if the stones themselves are teaching you how to breathe. You keep climbing, because Troy is built like a thought that refuses to stay on one level. The ground firms under your feet, packed and patient, and the air grows thinner in a way that feels less like altitude and more like clarity. Behind you, the lower lanes soften into a quiet blur. Ahead, the upper city gathers itself into sharper lines, stone, timber, and the dark geometry of rooftops against the star-salted sky. The path curves along the inner face of the cyclopean wall. Up here, the stones aren't just protection, they're presence. Each block holds the day's heat and releases it slowly, like a giant hand warmed by sun now laid gently against the night. You brush your fingertips across one surface as you pass, cooler than you expected, faintly gritty, a texture that reminds you the past wasn't smooth. The wall doesn't care that your life is complicated. It simply stands. It's annoying, honestly, how effective that is. A torch burns farther up, nested in a bracket where the wind can't bully it. The flame leans, then steadies, then leans again, an endless, sleepy nod. The light spills across a narrow stair set into the slope, and you take it slowly, step by step, letting your breathing match the rhythm. Inhale. Exhale. You could do this forever. You could become one of those calm, competent people who never panic. A tragic possibility. As you rise, you start to notice how the city watches itself. There are little vantage points, platforms, corners widened just enough for someone to stand and see. It's not paranoia. It's design. It's the simplest truth of living behind walls. You don't build them because you love fear. You build them because you love what's inside. A gust sweeps through a gap, carrying the scent of charred wood and something earthy, like clay freshly wetted. It stirs your hair, presses cool fingers against your neck, and then slips away toward the heights. The wind-up here has more room to be dramatic. It's still not loud, though. It's respectful. It knows people are sleeping. You pass a small cluster of roof lines where reed bundles lie stacked like folded blankets. A doorway is half covered by a hanging mat, and from behind it comes the softest sound, someone shifting in sleep, straw whispering. No voices, no drama, just the quiet proof that life continues even in a city that outsiders will later reduce to a single word: war. The night refuses to be that simple. The ascent leads you toward a darker mass ahead, stonework that thickens, angles that sharpen. The Scaean Gate is not a thing you stumble upon by accident. Even before you see its full shape, you can feel it as a change in gravity, like the city's spine rises here, and you're walking up the vertebrae. The approach narrows into a corridor of stone. The walls on either side are taller now, closer, pressing you into a kind of deliberate calm. If a place can teach you how to behave, this is one of those places. You lower your shoulders without thinking. You soften your steps. You become smaller, not in shame, but in respect for engineering that has been doing its job for generations. Then you reach the threshold. The gate's inner passage opens into an overlook, and the world drops away. You step forward, and suddenly you're above everything, above the lower city, above the plain, above the routes that curl like pale ribbons into darkness. The Scaean Gate, perched and certain, gives you the kind of view that can rearrange your mind. Below, the land spreads out in wide, breathing layers. You can make out the faint silver of water somewhere in the distance, the sea catching starlight in a thin, patient line. The plain is dark, but not blank. It's textured with low rises, shadowed gullies, and the suggestion of paths that have carried traders, messengers, farmers, and yes, armies. Up here, you understand why gates are more than doors. They're eyes. The wind meets you fully now, clean and cold. It slides across your face, fills your lungs, and carries with it a faint tang, salt, maybe, or the memory of it. You taste it and feel oddly awake, even as your body relaxes. The city behind you is warm stone and smoke-soft air. The world ahead is open, sharp, and honest. You lean on the parapet, stone that's been touched by countless hands, and let your gaze travel. The cyclopean walls loop around the city like a great ring of knuckles. You can trace their line in the torchlight. Here, a flare outward where the wall thickens. There, a corner sharpened for defense. Farther still, the suggestion of another tower, another watchpint. It's all so intentional. Not beautiful in the delicate way of flowers, but beautiful in the way a well-made tool is beautiful. The wall is a promise kept, day after day. You notice the quiet work embedded in the architecture. The gate's angles funnel people through a space that can be controlled. The stone surfaces are smooth where hands would have brushed them, worn by routine. There are grooves where wooden beams could be set, slots for bars, places for hinges. You can almost feel the mechanism of safety, close, secure weight. The city doesn't rely on hope. It relies on design. And somewhere deep in your chest, something unclenches, because the idea of a world that can be made safer by careful thinking is, how do you put it, comforting in a way your nervous system has been starving for. You stand there longer than you need to. The plane doesn't change. The stars don't hurry. Your thoughts, usually sprinting, start walking. You remember the ash-dark shrine you passed below, the smear of oil like a held promise. Up here, you understand that shrines and gates serve the same human need, the need to feel protected by something you can trust. Sometimes it's a god. Sometimes it's a wall. Sometimes it's the simple, boring repetition of people doing their jobs well. A shadow moves along the inner edge of the overlook, one of the night watchers making a slow circuit, their bronze catching a faint flicker. They don't address you. They don't need to. Their presence is enough to remind you that even in quiet, Troy is awake in the way a mother stays half awake when the house sleeps, listening, ready, calm. You turn from the view eventually, because the city has more to offer than horizons. The wind follows you, tugging gently at your clothing like it wants you to remember this feeling. The open world held at bay by stone, the fear acknowledged but not fed, the night made safe by hands and habits. You begin your descent from the overlook, not down into darkness, but down into the city's living warmth, toward wells and courtyards and the soft machinery of daily life. And as you step away from the Scaean Gate, you carry its lesson with you. Sometimes peace is not a gift. Sometimes it's built, block by block, and maintained by people who do not need to be famous to be essential. You wake into a different kind of quiet, one that isn't night's blanket, but morning's first careful breath. The sky is still dark blue, not yet convinced it wants to be day, and the air inside the walls feels cool and clean, like stone has filtered it for you. Somewhere nearby, a rooster considers making an announcement, thinks better of it, and settles for a half-hearted attempt. Even the animals are gentle here, as if Troy itself has a hand on their shoulder. You move through lanes that are beginning to stir. Door mats are lifted and shaken. Ashes are nudged in hearths until a thin ribbon of smoke rises, sleepy and pale. A woman steps out to sweep, the broom whispering over packed earth in steady strokes that sound like someone smoothing a sheet. No one rushes. The city's morning is not dramatic. It's practiced. And then you notice them, the water carriers. You don't hear them at first. You feel them, the subtle shift in the city's pulse, the way a path becomes a current. People step aside without thinking. Feet follow the same worn lines. Clay jars appear in hands and on hips, their rounded bodies catching the first hints of light. Some jars are small enough for a child to carry. Others are thick-bellied, heavy even before they're filled, designed for the long patience of transport. A few are strapped into wooden frames to balance the weight. Everything about them says, this is normal, and it matters. You've fallen behind the flow, not intruding, not leading, just moving with it like a leaf in a stream. The lane slopes downward toward the city's water places, and the air changes as you approach. It grows damper, cooler, tinged with the mineral scent of earth that has held water for generations. Troy sits on high ground, proud and strategic, which means water is not a casual luxury. It's the city's quiet discipline, its daily devotion. The first well you see is ringed with smooth stone, worn shiny at the lip where hands have rested and jars have bumped. The rope is thick, fibers frayed from use but strong. A wooden crossbeam spans above, dark with age, polished by palms and weather. Someone lowers a bucket with a practiced motion. No show, no wasted effort. The rope sings softly as it slides, a low, comforting sound like a lullaby with a purpose. You stand to one side, observing the ritual without interrupting it. The water comes up in a bucket that glints faintly in the dim. It's not sparkling, not magical. It's just water, dark, cold, heavy with life. And you watch the way people treat it, with care, with gratitude that doesn't need speeches. A woman steadies a jar while another pours, the stream controlled, precise, avoiding spills that would be forgiven but still sting. A boy holds a smaller vessel, eyes serious, because even children here understand the weight of what they carry. Someone's hands are damp and reddened from cold, but they don't complain. They simply adjust their grip and keep going. You notice the city's unspoken rules. Those with heavy jars move first. Those with small containers wait without resentment. The rope is handed back the right way. The bucket is never slammed down. It's all tiny respect. And watching it, your mind does something rare. It stops narrating your life as an emergency. You follow the line again as it splits, some people returning to households, others heading towards cisterns. Troy, with its walls and height, depends on stored water, especially when the world outside decides to be unfriendly. Cisterns are the city's deep memory, its hidden reservoirs of calm. You come to one set into the ground, its mouth covered with a stone slab that can be lifted and replaced. The cover is smoothed by years of touch, and the edges are sealed carefully, because contamination is not just inconvenient, it's disaster. Someone slides the slab aside with a wooden lever, and a cool breath rises from the darkness below, smelling of stone and wet earth. It's like opening a cellar of seasons. You peer down. The interior drops into shadow, but you can sense the space, the careful lining, the way the city has carved a pocket to hold life. A chain or rope descends, and the bucket goes down again, the sound deeper now, echoing softly. When it comes back up, water clings to the sides, beads catching the first true light of dawn as it begins to shift the sky from blue to pearl. A woman nearby checks the bucket with a glance, not suspicious, just responsible. She runs a thumb along the rim, wipes it clean. Someone else murmurs a small gesture of thanks, not words you can hear, more like a habit of reverence in the body. You remember the ash bowl at the shrine, the oil like a promise. This is the same energy, just directed at the most essential thing in the world. You walk with them as they turn back into the city. The jars are heavier now, and you see the way bodies compensate. Hips shift, spines straighten, steps shorten. Shoulders carry the weight without complaint, because complaining doesn't lighten anything. People balance their loads with cloth pads, with wooden yokes, with the quiet intelligence of doing a hard thing every day and getting good at it. The morning brightens. Not suddenly. Troy doesn't do sudden. Light leaks in slowly, softening corners, revealing textures. The walls of houses glow warm where sunlight touches mud brick. Reed roofs catch a faint shimmer of dew. Smoke threads upward in thin lines, and the scent of baking begins to emerge. Grain warming, yeast waking, comfort arriving. As you pass a courtyard, you see a woman pour a small amount of water into a basin and use it to rinse her hands before touching dough. The gesture is simple, but it feels ceremonial. Clean hands, clean water, clean start. Your chest loosens again, and you realize you've been carrying tension like a jar you forgot you were holding. A small dog trots beside one of the carriers, tail low, sleepy but loyal. It pauses to sniff at your foot, decides you're not interesting, and returns to its person. The city is full of these tiny judgments. You don't take them personally. You're learning. Troy is teaching you to be less dramatic, and you hate how soothing it is. You continue through a lane where the stone underfoot is slicker from years of moisture and use. A few drops have splashed from a jar, darkening the earth. The carrier doesn't stop to stare at the spill. They simply keep moving. The city will drink the drops back. Nothing is wasted, not even mistakes. As the flow disperses into homes and workshops, you slow and stand for a moment in the widening light. The water carriers disappear into doorways, behind curtains, into the private geography of family life. The city's morning machine continues, sweeping, stirring, feeding fires, waking children with gentle hands. And you, somehow, feel invited. Not as a guest who must be entertained, but as a presence allowed to witness. You've walked Troy's heights at night, and watched its horizons from the Scaean Gate. Now you've seen what truly holds the city together, the quiet, repetitive bravery of bringing water home. You turn your face into the new sun and breathe in, slow and steady, like you're learning the rhythm too. The day settles into motion the way a shawl settles onto shoulders, without fuss, with purpose. You drift from the lanes where water jars disappeared into doorways and follow a different current now, a softer one, threaded with the faint scent of lanolin and smoke. The city's sounds change as you walk, less rope on stone and bucket splash, more the subtle percussion of domestic work, wood tapped against wood, a broom whisper, a clay lid set down carefully so it doesn't crack. You pass a courtyard where sunlight spills like warm milk over packed earth. The space is enclosed by low walls, reed roofs, and the steady geometry of daily life. Here, the air is gentler, less sharp than up by the gate. It carries the smell of wool, of drying herbs, of damp cloth laid out to catch the sun. A small fig tree grows near the edge, its leaves glossy, casting quaint-shaped shadows that tremble with every breath of wind. And there, under a shaded awning, in the cool comfort between sun and shadow, you find the looms. They're not grand, not museum perfect. They're working looms, wooden frames with their corners rounded from years of hands brushing past. Threads hang in tight vertical lines like pale rain. The warp is stretched with a seriousness that makes you straighten your posture without thinking. You don't step too close. You don't touch. You simply watch, because even if you don't understand every technique, you can recognize concentration when you see it. A woman sits at one loom, her feet planted, her back steady. Her hands move with the kind of calm speed that comes from repetition, the skill of doing one thing 1,000 times and still doing it with care. A shuttle slips through the threads, and then a comb-like tool beats the new weft into place with a sound that's oddly soothing, thup, thup, thup. Like a heartbeat, but quieter. Like the city reminding itself it's alive. Beside her, someone winds yarn into neat balls, guiding the strand between fingers, smoothing it as if smoothing worry. A child sits nearby with a small basket of scraps, picking out bits of plant matter caught in the fleece. Their face is serious in the way only children can be when they're trusted with real work. You remember the boy at the well holding his vessel like it mattered. Troy teaches responsibility early, not as a punishment, but as a way of belonging. You step into the edge of the courtyard's shade and let the rhythm wash over you. The looms beat, the quiet scrape of thread, the soft exhale of someone concentrating. It's a soundscape that makes your eyelids feel heavier even while your mind stays alert. A perfect bedtime contradiction. On a low bench, dyed wool is laid out in skeins, loops of color that look almost unreal in the morning light. Not neon, not modern bright, but deep and natural, the rusty warmth of madderroot red, the muted gold of saffron or onion skin, the smoky blue of woad. Some strands are still damp, catching light in tiny points. Others are dry and fluffy, their fibers haloed in sun. You follow the colors to a corner where dyed pots sit over low heat. The pots are blackened on the outside, their rims crusted with old pigment. Someone stirs a liquid that is dark and glossy, steam rising in faint curls. The steam smells sharp, vinegar or urine used as mordant, the practical chemistry of making color stay. There's no romance in the smell, which is exactly why it feels real. Beauty here is a little bit stinky, like most worthwhile things. The dyer, older, hands stained faintly with blue-gray, moves with quiet authority. They lift a bundle of wool with a stick, let it drip back into the pot, then lower it again. Patience is the main ingredient. You can't force dye to penetrate. You can only invite it, over and over, until it decides to belong. You glance back to the loom and notice the pattern emerging, not just stripes, but small repeating motifs, geometric shapes that hold meaning. A chevron that might echo waves. A stepped line that might echo mountains. A small diamond that could be nothing, or could be a family's signature. A way to say this cloth came from these hands, this courtyard, this life. It hits you then. This is how history survives without libraries. Not in grand chronicles, but in textiles. In patterns that get taught, repeated, altered slightly, remembered in muscle and passed down like a secret recipe. The walls protect bodies. The cloth protects stories. You move along the courtyard's edge, careful to stay out of the way, and your gaze catches on a pile of finished fabric folded neatly. The cloth looks thick and honest, a little uneven in places, because humans made it, not machines. You imagine it as a cloak, as a blanket, as a wrap for a baby, as a shroud one day, because Troy is practical enough to hold all stages of life in one piece of fabric without flinching. A breeze slips through, lifting a corner of cloth. For a second it flutters like a flag, and you feel this silly modern impulse to read it as an omen. Then you remember, it's just wind. Troy doesn't do melodrama. It does weather. Still, the breeze carries a faint whisper of something else, baking bread from nearby ovens, smoke from cooking fires, the warm animal scent of wool. Your stomach registers it with quiet approval. Your body, which has been tense for no good reason all week, seems to relax into the fact that here, tasks are clear. Spin, weave, dye, fold, repeat. You notice a basket of spindle whorls, small weights of clay or stone used in spinning, each one slightly different, some decorated with simple marks. A few are chipped but still functional. Tools here aren't thrown away because they're imperfect. They're used until they truly can't be. There's a strange comfort in that, as if the city is giving you permission to keep going even with your own chips and scratches. You linger at the edge of the work, letting the loom's beat become part of your breathing. Inhale as the shuttle passes. Exhale as the thread is packed down. It's almost hypnotic. You could fall asleep standing up, which would be embarrassing, but honestly, in a place like this, it would also be kind of on brand. As the sun climbs higher, the courtyard brightens, and the workers shift slightly, adjusting shade, moving damp skeins into more light, setting finished pieces into cooler corners. The day continues unbroken. No one announces a new chapter. No one says, "And now we begin." They simply keep working, and the city keeps being itself. You step away eventually, carrying the rhythm with you like a soft fabric draped over your thoughts. The sound of the loom stays in your ears as you return to the lanes, and you realize it's already becoming a callback you'll remember later. Like the ropes singing at the well, like the wind at the Scaean Gate, like the steady insistence of stone. Troy isn't just built from walls and bronze. It's built from thread. The loom beat follows you for a while, thup, 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 even after the courtyard disappears behind corners and reed roofs. It fades as new smells take over, smoke with a sweeter edge, grain warming, fat sizzling somewhere out of sight. Your body knows what this means before your brain catches up. Food is happening. The city is turning its mornings into strength. You walk toward the scent like it's a rope you're holding with your eyes closed. The lanes widen in places, opening into little shared spaces where people pass one another with the quiet choreography of familiarity. A woman carries a flat board dusted with flour, careful and steady. A boy trots beside her with a small bundle of kindling tucked under his arm. Someone steps out of a doorway with a clay bowl and a cloth, then vanishes again like a thought that decided not to bother you. The first ovens you see are low and rounded, like small domes of baked earth, their surfaces cracked in fine lines from heat and time. They look humble, and then you get close and feel the radiating warmth, and you realize they're powerful in the most domestic way. The opening of one oven glows faintly, not bright flame, but the deep orange heart of coals. A smell rolls out, smoky, nutty, alive. Your stomach does that thing where it quietly forgives you for every stressful decision you made yesterday. There is no loud clatter here. Even cooking sounds restrained, muffled by clay walls and practiced hands. You watch the motions. Someone rakes embers with a flat stick, drawing heat where it's needed. Someone else slaps a disk of dough onto the inner wall of the oven with a quick, confident gesture, like placing a palm against warm stone. The dough clings and begins to change immediately, becoming food in front of your eyes. It's honest magic. In a shaded corner, a bronze kettle sits over a small fire. The kettle is darkened with soot, its belly rounded, its rim gleaming where it has been cleaned and handled. Steam rises in slow curls, carrying the scent of herbs. Maybe thyme, maybe bay, maybe something bitter and medicinal. A ladle rests nearby, its handle worn smooth. Someone lifts the lid briefly, and the steam thickens, warm and damp against your face. Then the lid is set back in place with care, because heat is precious and nobody here wastes it. You drift closer, not to intrude, but to witness. Cooking in Troy feels like one of those things that holds everything together, like water carrying and weaving. Food is not just food, it's routine. It's reassurance. It's how you tell the body, quietly, you are safe enough to digest. On a low table, ingredients are laid out, grain in a shallow basket, dried figs, a small pile of olives, a chunk of cheese wrapped in cloth. There's a bowl of salt, coarse and pale, and a small jar of oil that catches sunlight like liquid gold. Someone sprinkles flour on a board, and it puffs into the air in a soft cloud, then settles on their hands like a second skin. You can almost feel it on your own fingers, that fine dryness, that comforting mess. You notice the economy of motion. A woman kneads dough with her palms, pushing and folding, her shoulders relaxed, her breathing steady. The dough yields and resists, like a stubborn thought being worked into something useful. Nearby, a child shapes smaller pieces, clumsy but earnest, pressing thumbprints into the surface. The thumbprints make the bread look personal, like it's signed. And in your mind, some part of you, your modern, anxious part, tries to label all of this as simple. But you can't. Not when you see how much knowledge lives in these hands. How to keep a fire at the right heat without thermometers. How to judge dough by feel. How to stretch grain to feed more mouths without turning it into sadness. How to make comfort out of smoke, clay, and patience. You step away from the oven's heat and into a cooler patch of shade where a pile of bowls sits stacked. The bowls are mismatched, some chipped, some newly fired. They're all used anyway. The city doesn't seem embarrassed by wear. Wear means something has been loved enough to be used. A scent catches your attention, meat, but not heavy, more like broth. You follow it to the bronze kettle again, and you realize this is a place where many small pots and fires exist at once, a constellation of nourishment. Some households cook privately. Others share heat and labor. The lines blur. The result is a warmth that isn't just temperature, but social glue. Your gaze drifts to the ground near the ovens, where ash has been swept into tidy piles. Someone has drawn a simple line in the ash, maybe counting loaves, maybe marking batches, maybe just absent-mindedly making order out of dust. It reminds you of the ash bowl at the little shrine earlier, the oil glinting like promise. In Troy, ash is never just waste. It's part of the cycle. Fire to ash to soil, heat to bread to strength. A small breeze moves through, carrying smoke in a thin ribbon. It slips into your hair and clothes, and you realize you'll smell like this for a while, with smoke and warm grain. It's the kind of scent that makes you feel held, like a blanket fresh from a fire-warmed line. You can already imagine how later, when you're walking along bronze shrines or ramparts, one whiff of smoke will pull you back to this moment. That's how the city creates continuity. It perfumes your memory. You watch a loaf being pulled from the oven with a hook stick. The surface is brown, blistered in places, dusted with flour that has baked into pale freckles. The crust cracks as it cools, making the tiniest sound, like a sigh. The loaf is set on a cloth, and steam rises from it, thick and comforting. You don't need to be offered a piece to feel nourished. Just seeing it is enough to calm something inside you that has been clenched for far too long. You move along the line of ovens, letting the heat touch your hands, your cheeks, your tired face. You think of the Scaean Gate's cold wind, the well's dark water, the loom's steady beat. Now here is warmth. Not the sharp warmth of victory, not the loud warmth of celebration, but the slow, reliable warmth of a city feeding itself. And you realize, with a sleepy kind of awe, that these ordinary places, ovens, kettles, boards dusted with flour, are as much Troy as any wall or shrine. They are the underside of legend. They are the truth the songs rarely sing, because it's not flashy enough. But your body knows better. Your body will always remember the smell of bread before it remembers the name of a hero. You step back into the lane with smoke clinging to you like a quiet blessing, and you let the city carry you onward, full of heat and grain and the calm certainty that someone, somewhere, is always keeping the coals alive. The warmth of ovens follows you out into the lanes, clinging to your clothes like a quiet charm. Smoke threads through your hair. The faint scent of baked grain stays on your breath. It's the sort of comfort you don't notice until later, when it's gone, so for now, you let yourself notice it. You let it be real. You let it be enough. As the morning grows more certain, the city's pathways begin to shift into their daytime identities. Narrow lanes become routes. Courtyards become crossroads. People step out with baskets, bundles, and that look on their faces that says, "I'm not doing anything exciting, I'm just keeping life from falling apart." A heroic expression, honestly, and wildly underappreciated. You follow the flow toward the market, because even if you never buy anything, markets teach you how a place breathes. The sounds arrive first, the soft thump of goods set down, the rattle of pottery, the scrape of wood. There's no loud shouting here, not in the way modern markets sometimes scream at you. Troy's market is more like a conversation held at a respectful volume. It's busy, but not chaotic. It wants your nervous system to survive. Reed awnings stretch overhead, tied to posts and roof edges, creating a canopy that breaks the sun into softer shapes. Light filters through in thin, bright stripes, turning dust motes into tiny drifting stars. The shade smells of dry plant fibers and warmed earth. Under it, the stalls form a careful maze, tables of wood, woven mats, baskets lined in rows. The whole place feels temporary and ancient at once, as if it could be packed up in an hour but has also always been here. You step into the first lane of stalls and slow your pace. Your eyes take in olives piled in shallow bowls, green-black, glossy, like little stones that learn how to be edible. Nearby, dried figs sit wrinkled and sweet, their skins dusted with flour or fine sand. There are bundles of herbs tied with string, their scents bruising the air when someone brushes past. Thyme, mint, something bitter and medicinal you can't name but your body recognizes as probably good for you. A potter's stall catches your attention. Bowls and cups are stacked in neat towers, their edges slightly uneven, because human hands made them. Some are painted with simple lines, waves, spirals, geometric marks that echo the weaving patterns you saw earlier. You watch a woman lift a bowl and tap it lightly with her knuckle. The sound is clear, not dull. She nods to herself and sets it back, satisfied. Even without words, you understand. Quality has a sound. Farther down, bronze glints from under cloth. Not weapons yet, more like tools. Knives for cutting rope, small awls for leatherwork, fish hooks, needles. Items that keep daily life stitched together. The metal catches sunlight in a way that makes you think of the war shrine oil smear again, that promise held in a shimmer. Here, bronze is not threat. It's utility. You watch an exchange happen at a stall of grain. A man measures barley into a basket using a scoop, leveling it with the side of his hand. The gesture is quick, practiced. Then he pauses, just a fraction, and you see the tiny space where dishonesty could live. A scoop could be heaped or leveled. A basket could be pressed down or left loose. A thumb could slide in to steal a little. The market is a place where trust is tested in teaspoons. But Troy doesn't feel like a place that thrives on cheating. It feels like a place that knows cheating exists and builds little social walls against it. People watch. People remember. Reputation moves faster than carts. A vendor who cheats too often might gain a day's extra grain and lose a season's customers. Here, survival is collective. You don't bite the hands you'll need tomorrow. Still, you notice the small tricks. A set of stone weights sits at a cloth merchant's stall, smooth, rounded, each one etched with marks. They look official, but you know how humans are. Even the most official things can be creatively interpreted. One weight might be a hair lighter. One stone might have a chipped corner filed just so. It's not necessarily malicious. Sometimes it's just life, people trying to tilt luck a fraction in their direction. You almost smile. Modern, you might roll your eyes. Ancient you, who you are becoming as you walk, simply observes and accepts. Nobody is pure. Nobody is villain. People are hungry, tired, clever, hopeful. The market is where all of that becomes visible. The lane narrows near a stall of textiles. Cloth hangs from a line, moving gently in the breeze. The colors are softer than modern dyes, but they have depth, dusty reds, sun-warmed yellows, blue that looks like sky caught in fiber. Your fingers itch to touch, but you don't. You've learned the city's etiquette. Respect the work. Let it be. A basket of wool sits below the hanging cloth, raw and unwashed, still smelling faintly of sheep and earth. You think of the dyer's stained hands, the loom's steady beat. The market, suddenly, feels like a place where threads converge. Water brought from wells, grain baked into bread, wool turned into warmth, bronze shaped into tools. This isn't just buying and selling. It's the city exchanging its own labor, distributing it, making sure everyone has what they need to keep going. Your attention drifts to a corner where fish lie on a bed of reeds, their scales catching light like tiny mirrors. The smell is sharp but not rotten, freshness held by shade and speed. Someone has placed small chunks of salt nearby, ready to preserve what can't be eaten immediately. Troy doesn't waste. Troy plans. A woman passes with a basket of small round fruits, maybe plums, deep purple, almost black. The fruit's scent is faintly sweet, and for a moment you think about how strange it is that you can stand in a place defined by walls and war in later stories and still find something so ordinary and alive as someone carrying fruit to feed a household. It's like the legend has holes, and through them you can see the real city breathing. You move deeper into the market, letting the reed awnings shade your face. Dust rises in soft puffs under feet. It catches in the stripes of sunlight and turns the air into something almost visible, like you're walking through a gentle golden fog. The sound of pottery clinks and basket weave creaks becomes a kind of music. At one stall, you notice a small pile of carved tokens, simple shapes, maybe used to mark credit or debt. A hand takes one, another hand receives it, and the token disappears into cloth. Not everything in the market is immediate exchange. Some is trust extended. Some is obligation recorded. Civilization, you realize, is not grand palaces. It's tiny systems that keep people from panicking. You stand at the edge of the market lane for a moment and let it all wash over you. The smells, the textures, the careful honesty, the occasional slyness, the quiet competence. Your body relaxes again. Not because you've escaped the world, but because you've entered a world where the rules are visible. Measure, trade, remember, repeat. And you carry that steadiness with you as you step out from under the reed awnings, the sun warmer now, the city's next destination's waiting, bronze shrines and ringing workshops, and the deeper heartbeats of Troy. The market's reed shade falls away behind you, and the sunlight feels more direct now, still gentle, but firmer, like the day has finally decided to commit. Your eyes adjust as you move into a quieter stretch of the city where lanes widen and footsteps soften. The air here carries less of bread and fruit and more of metal warmed by hand, oil kept in sealed jars, ash that has been swept and saved. You feel it before you see it, a hush that isn't emptiness, but intention. The war shrines of Troy don't announce themselves with grand gates or towering columns. They sit where they need to sit, near routes that matter, near places where tools become weapons, near the city's pulse points. They are not for spectacle. They are for steadying the mind. They are for reminding people, gently and without drama, that fear exists and can be managed. You approach one shrine set into a small alcove of stone. A low platform supports a shallow bowl blackened by many fires. The ash inside is pale, fine as flour, gathered into a careful mound rather than scattered. A thin line of soot traces the bowl's rim like a dark eyelash. Beside it sits a small jar of oil, stoppered, squat, its surface catching light in a controlled gleam. A few bronze objects rest nearby, not gleaming swords, not theatrical helmets, but practical things: an arrowhead, a rivet, a small knife, a piece of harness hardware. Offerings, yes, but also reminders. A city doesn't only worship victory, it worships readiness. You stand without stepping over the threshold line worn into the ground. The threshold matters. Even if nobody is watching, you can feel the city's etiquette in your bones now. You let your hands hang loosely at your sides. You let your breathing slow. The shrine does not ask you to believe in anything specific. It asks you to pause. A faint scent rises from the bowl. Old smoke, resin, the ghost of burned herbs. It is not harsh. It is familiar, like the smell embedded in the wood of the ovens, but thinner, more sacred in its restraint. You notice how the sunlight hits the ash, turning it almost silvery. Ash is what remains when fire finishes its work. It's the end state of heat, the proof that something was offered and consumed. In a place like Troy, that symbolism isn't abstract. Fire keeps you warm. Fire bakes your bread. Fire hardens your pottery. Fire tempers your bronze. Fire can also do other things. The shrine holds all of that in one quiet bowl. You move along to another shrine, this one larger, tucked beneath a canopy that throws patterned shade across stone. Here, a bronze stand supports a helmet, old, dented, its cheek guards slightly bent. The helmet is not polished to pretend it's new. The dents are left there like honest wrinkles. Someone has draped a strip of cloth beneath it, and the cloth is stained faintly with oil. The oil catches light and makes the bronze look alive, like skin. You watch a person approach, not in a hurry, not in performance. They carry a small cup, tilt it, and let a thin stream of oil fall onto the shrine's surface. The oil runs slowly, clinging to metal, pooling in tiny hollows. The person's hands move with care, not superstition. Then they step back. No dramatic gestures. No loud prayers. Just a moment of alignment, like straightening a crooked picture frame in your mind. You don't need to understand the exact names of the gods to understand the human need beneath it. The act is simple. Acknowledge what scares you, honor what protects you, ask for steadiness. Your modern brain wants to be clever about it, to label it ritual, and feel distant. But your body, quiet and honest, recognizes it as something you still do, just in different outfits. You check locks. You refresh apps. You rehearse conversations in your head. Same impulse. Different century. The path between shrines is lined with small niches. Some hold little figurines, roughly formed, more symbolic than realistic. Some hold stones marked with simple scratches. Some are empty, waiting. You notice how many of these spaces are maintained. Someone sweeps dust away. Someone removes dead leaves. Someone keeps the oil jar stoppered and clean. Sacredness here isn't a rare event. It's upkeep. You come to a broader shrine space near a small open area where the air feels heavier with metal. You suspect, correctly, that this place sits near the work of armorers and smiths. The shrine acts like a hinge between making and fighting, between craft and consequence. A low stone table holds bronze discs and a few lengths of leather. There's also a small pile of broken weapon pieces, bent arrowheads, a snapped blade tip, a cracked buckle. It's not a trash pile. It's an offering of what has failed, given back to the city's spiritual economy. You think of how the market keeps tokens of debt, how the cistern keeps water, how the wall keeps safety. The shrine keeps the emotional residue people don't want to carry alone. The sun shifts, and a breeze moves through, lifting the scent of oil. It's warm, slightly sweet, and it sticks to your memory the way smoke did earlier. You know this scent will return to you later, when you hear hammers ring, when you walk the ramparts, when you sense tension in the air. This is how Troy builds continuity. It threads smell through experience like dye through wool. You stand near the edge of the shrine space and look around. People pass, some pausing briefly, some not. Not everyone stops at every shrine. Not everyone needs the same ritual every day. That feels quietly modern. Even in ancient stone, people are still people. Some devout, some practical, some skeptical, some too tired to do anything but keep walking. The city accommodates them all without demanding uniformity. Your gaze drifts to a bronze bowl with a shallow pool of water inside, set beside a larger ash bowl. The water reflects the sky in a trembling patch of blue. You remember the wells, the cistern breath rising cool from darkness. Here, water sits in a sacred context, not for drinking, but for cleansing, hands, tools, the mind. It's a reminder that readiness isn't only about sharpening blades. It's about washing fear off your fingers so you can hold your life steady. You let yourself imagine the purpose of these shrines when the world presses harder. A person returns from the gate, hands shaking a little. They come here. A person is about to leave on patrol, stomach tight. They come here. A person has lost something, not necessarily a life, but an illusion of safety. They come here. The shrine doesn't fix everything. It doesn't erase pain. It simply gives you a place to put your weight down for a moment, so you can pick it up again in a more manageable shape. You step back from the last shrine and feel your shoulders drop. You didn't say anything. You didn't need to. The city's silence is doing the work. The bronze gleam, the ash, the oil, these are Troy's quiet tools for surviving not just enemies, but the mind's own storms. As you leave the shrine area, you carry the scent of oil with you, mixed now with smoke and bread and dye and dust. Troy is layering itself onto you, making you heavier with memory but lighter with fear. The next sounds ahead are brighter, metal struck, hammers ringing like rain. The city's craft is calling you onward. The closer you get, the more the air itself seems to change texture. It grows warmer, sharper, threaded with the faint metallic tang that lives in places where tools are used with intensity. And then the sound arrives fully, clear, rhythmic, persistent. Hammer on bronze. Not chaos. Not noise. A patterned ring. The armorer's quarter of Troy announces itself like that, through repetition. A steady ringing that travels down lanes, bounces off stone, and settles into your ribs. If the loom's thump was a heartbeat, and the well-roped song was a lullaby, this is something else, an alertness made musical. It's the sound of a city that refuses to be surprised. You step into the quarter and immediately feel how the streets have been shaped around work. The lanes are slightly wider here, allowing carts to pass with loads of charcoal, bundles of wood, bars of raw metal. Doorways open into workshops where the light is different, orange and trembling from fires, sharp white from sun caught on polished surfaces. The air carries layers, smoke, oil, sweat, hot clay, and the faint smell of wet leather. You move slowly, because moving slowly is how you survive not just physically, but emotionally. This place is intense, and the city doesn't apologize for that. It simply expects you to adapt. A workshop stands open, and you pause at the edge. Inside, a small furnace glows. Not a towering inferno, just a focused mouth of heat, fed carefully so it stays hungry and efficient. Charcoal sits in baskets, black and matte, ready to become fire. A bellows rests nearby, its leather folds worn from use, its wooden handles polished by palms. You watch it rise and fall in a steady rhythm, pushing air into flame, making heat sharper, making the world obey. Bronze pieces lie on a workbench, a half-formed helmet, a strip that will become a greave, a few rivets set aside like tiny golden seeds. The metal is not cold even where it looks still. It holds warmth. It holds potential. The craft here is a conversation between human and material. Push too hard and it cracks. Go too soft and it won't hold shape. The worker's hands know where that line is in the way your hands know how much pressure to use to hold a fragile cup. You see tools laid out with a kind of reverence that isn't religious but is close. Hammers of different sizes. Tongs. Files. Stones for smoothing. A small bowl of oil, again, that scent, used to protect and maintain. Oil is everywhere in Troy, slipping through your memory like a repeated motif. At shrines, on door hinges, on bronze surfaces, on hands that need to keep working. The ringing sound continues outside, layered now from multiple workshops. Some strikes are deep and heavy. Some are quick and bright. Each has its own voice. If you listen long enough, you could probably tell what was being made just from sound, the broad shaping of a breastplate, the delicate adjustment of a hinge, the tightening of rivets. Your modern brain wants to record it like an ASMR track. Your ancient brain, newly borrowed, understands it as the city's breathing. You walk farther along and pass a rack where finished pieces hang. Helmets, not all identical, some simpler, some with small ridges, some with cheek guards that curve like protective hands. Shields lean against a wall, their faces covered in leather or hide stretched tight. The hide is stitched along the edges with careful hands, and the stitching itself looks like a quiet signature. These items aren't just meant to intimidate outsiders. They're meant to fit bodies. They're meant to move with people. They're intimate. A pile of scrap metal sits in a corner, glinting. Broken pieces, shavings, offcuts. Nothing is wasted. Even waste here is a resource waiting to be melted again. You remember the broken weapon offerings at the shrine, the idea of giving failure back to the system. In the armorer's quarter, that idea becomes literal. Metal doesn't die. It changes form. The smell of hot bronze catches your attention, faint, but distinct, like coins warmed in sunlight. You watch as a piece is lifted from heat with tongs and set onto an anvil. The metal surface is dull, almost shy, until the hammer meets it. Then it responds. It flattens. It curves. It becomes what it's asked to be, not without resistance, but with cooperation. It's hard not to feel something in your chest watching that. It's a metaphor waiting to happen, and you're too tired to fight it. You wander past another workspace where leatherworkers sit. Straps and harness pieces are spread out like vines, ready to be cut and punched. A tool presses holes in a steady rhythm, softer than the bronze ringing but equally purposeful. The leather smells rich and animal, and someone rubs it with oil or fat to keep it supple. You realize again, readiness isn't just metal. It's the whole ecosystem of materials, bronze, leather, wood, cloth, held together by the same patient hands. A young apprentice moves through, carrying a shallow tray of rivets. Their steps are careful, because rivets are small but essential, and dropping them would be a mistake that ripples into delays, and delays can matter. The apprentice's face is set in concentration. You recognize that look. It's the same look the child had at the loom, the boy had at the well. In Troy, children are given real weight to carry, not always jars, sometimes responsibility. You pause near a stone basin where water sits, used to cool tools or rinse hands. The water is dark, with a thin film of oil on top that catches the light in rainbow sheen. You watch a hand dip a tool, hear the hiss as heat meets water, and feel it in your own skin as a sudden awareness. This place is dangerous. Fire, sharp edges, heavy objects. And yet it feels controlled. The danger is not chaotic. It is managed by skill, routine, attention. The ringing begins to feel less like noise and more like a kind of protection. A sonic wall. A reminder that people are awake, working, maintaining the city's readiness even in ordinary hours. You imagine briefly the contrast, how quiet the city might feel if these sounds stopped. That thought makes you appreciate the relentless rhythm more. It's not paranoia. It's care. You move toward the edge of the quarter where the sound opens up, the lanes widening again. The ringing fades slightly behind you, replaced by more ordinary noises, footsteps, baskets, birds. But the vibration stays in your bones, like a heartbeat after you leave a loud room. You carry it with you. And as you walk, you find yourself thinking in a steadier way. Not because you've become fearless, but because you've seen how fear gets handled here, not by denial, not by bravado, but by craft, by making, by maintaining, by hitting metal until it fits the shape of survival. Ahead, the city's smell shifts again. Hay, animals, warm breath. Stables, horses. A different kind of strength waiting for you, calm and heavy and alive. The ringing of bronze softens behind you, not disappearing so much as settling into the city's background, like distant thunder you've decided to trust. As you move onward, the air changes again, trading sharp metal tang for something warmer, heavier, and unmistakably alive. You smell hay first, dry, sweet, sun-cured. Then you smell animals, the rich, musky scent of horses, mixed with leather and dust and the faint edge of sweat. It's not unpleasant. It's honest. It's the smell of strength that breathes. The stables sit slightly apart from the tightest lanes, because bodies this large need space to turn. The ground here is more churned, marked by hooves and the drag of feet. Wooden rails frame training areas. Posts stand in lines for tethering. A trough holds water that catches sky in a dull shimmer. Flies drift lazily in sunbeams, then dart away when a tail flicks. You step in quietly, because you have learned something important in Troy. Quiet is a kind of respect. Horses notice everything, even when they pretend not to, even when they are half asleep. Their ears swivel like antennae, catching the story of your footsteps before you reach them. A horse stands near a post, head lowered, one hind leg relaxed. Its coat is dark and glossy, catching light along the curve of its neck. The animal's breath moves its flank in slow waves. You watch the rhythm, inhale, exhale, and realize your own breathing has been mimicking the city all day. Now, without thinking, you begin to mimic the horse. Slow, deep, steady. If your anxious brain tries to interrupt, the horse's calm politely ignores it. A groom works nearby, brushing a coat with long strokes. The brush makes a soft rasping sound, like wind through reeds. Dust rises in a faint cloud, then falls. The groom's posture is relaxed but attentive, no sudden movements, no careless gestures. The hand that holds the brush is also the hand that can soothe, correct, guide. The horse leans slightly into the brushing, not dramatic, just accepting. Trust in its simplest form, an animal letting a human handle its body without fear. You move along the row of stalls, keeping to the sides so you don't interrupt the flow of work. The stalls are made of wood and stone, built sturdy, with doors that swing on oiled hinges. Again oil, always oil, making the city's joints move smoothly. Inside one stall, a horse lifts its head and blinks at you, slow and heavy-lidded, like you've interrupted a nap. Its nostrils flare once, testing your scent. Then it exhales, a warm gust that carries the smell of hay and breath and something deeper, almost like earth after rain. It goes back to its quiet. You notice tack hanging on pegs, bridles, reins, saddle pads, straps. Leather darkened by sweat and use, rubbed with fat to keep it from cracking. Bits of bronze glint among the leather, polished where they've been handled. Everything is maintained. Nothing is left to chance. Troy doesn't just build walls. It builds systems of care. In an open training space, you see a horse being led in a slow circle. The handler's steps are measured. The rope, thick, secure, doesn't pull, it guides. The horse's ears flick back and forth, listening to the human, listening to the world. Its hooves thud softly on packed earth, a sound that feels grounding in the most literal sense. Each step presses the earth down, reminding it who is heavier. The horse tosses its head once, not in panic, but in mild impatience, the animal equivalent of an eye roll. The handler doesn't react with anger or force. They pause, steady, then continue, adjusting their own pace as if saying, without words, "Yes, I hear you, and we're still doing this." You feel a strange tenderness in your chest. This is not domination. This is relationship. It's training as communication, not cruelty. You come to a trough where water sits cool and dark, A horse dips its muzzle, drinks, and lifts its head with droplets falling from its whiskers. The droplets catch sunlight briefly and turn into tiny sparks. You think of the cistern's breath, the well's deep cold, the sacred water bowl at the shrine. Water again, everywhere, supporting everything. Even horses, even war, even legend. The city's true hero is water, and nobody writes songs about it because it's too busy being essential. Near the edge of the stables, bundles of hay are stacked neatly, tied with rough twine. Someone has arranged them so air can pass through, keeping them dry. A cat sits on top of the stack, eyes half closed, looking like it owns the entire operation. Cats, as usual, are convinced they run history. You watch a farrier-like figure examine a hoof, lifting the leg carefully. The horse shifts its weight, trusting enough to balance. The human's fingers press gently along the hoof wall, checking for cracks, heat, tenderness. This is care in its most intimate form. A hoof problem can become a disaster. A small crack can turn into a limp. A limp can turn into vulnerability. So someone checks patiently, every day, as if preventing catastrophe is simply part of breakfast. You feel your mind quiet further. The stables have their own soundscape: brushing, hoof thuds, leather creaks, the occasional snort, the soft rustle of hay. It's like ASMR designed by the ancient world, natural, repetitive, grounding. Your eyelids feel heavier, but your awareness stays gentle and clear. You think briefly of how outsiders might imagine Troy, all bronze and shouting, all drama and violence. Standing here among horses, you see a different truth. A city that relies on horses must learn gentleness, because horses cannot be forced into calm. Calm must be taught and shared. The city's power depends on soft hands as much as strong walls. A breeze moves through the open space, carrying the scent of hay and warm animal breath. It slides across your skin and makes you aware of how tired you are, not in a desperate way, but in a normal way. The kind of tiredness that deserves rest, not shame. You step back from the training area and let the stables fade behind you. The bronze ringing is distant now, the market bustle muted. Troy's different layers have touched you: stone, water, thread, bread, trade, shrine, metal, horse. Each one has taken a little of your tension and replaced it with something steadier. Ahead, the city's lanes narrow again, and you can sense a shift coming, not in tone, but in purpose. Somewhere in Troy, a small problem is waiting to surface, the way a loose thread waits to be noticed. For now you keep walking, calm and observant, letting the horse's breathing rhythm stay with you as you move into whatever the day quietly reveals. The stables fall behind you, and your body keeps the horse's rhythm anyway: slow inhale, slower exhale, like calm you can borrow and carry. The sun is higher now, practical and steady, smoothing the city into clear shapes. Troy moves with daytime certainty, smoke rising in thin threads, cloth fluttering on lines, baskets passing through lanes with the quiet confidence of routine. You drift away from the market's reed shade and toward streets that feel more enclosed. Doorways narrow, walls thicken. The air turns cooler and drier, scented with clay dust and old grain. Storerooms. A long, low building leans into the inner slope of the wall, its entrance shaded like a mouth that prefers to stay quiet. Near the threshold, a stone shelf holds a shallow tray of kneaded clay. Above it, cords hang from pegs. Everything here is set up for one repeated action: tie, press, harden, prove. You stop just short of the doorway line and study the small details. On a ledge sit broken pieces of old seals, dry clay fragments bearing crisp imprints, spirals, rosettes, a tiny animal shape. These aren't pretty extras. They're identity. They're how Troy keeps order without watching every jar every moment. A person steps out of the shade with a basket of those fragments, the legitimate leftovers of a seal opened properly. The fragments clink softly. Then the person pauses, still as if the body heard something the ears didn't. Brows tighten. Hands hover. The air grows heavier, the way it does right before a storm that hasn't arrived yet. More people gather, not loudly, not theatrically, but fast. Fingers pat belts and pouches. A hand checks the clay tray, then checks again. Someone points toward a low table, toward a wooden tray worn with familiar indentations. The seal stones are not there. They're small, small enough to fit in a palm, so the absence feels ridiculous and huge at once. Without a seal stone, fresh clay can't be stamped. Without the stamp, a tied cord is only a tied cord. Without the mark, an open jar could be ordinary use, or quiet theft wearing polite hands. When proof disappears, suspicion breeds fast, and Troy knows it. Inside, the storeroom air is cooler, thick with the scent of grain and dried fruit. Jars sit in rows, mouths covered with cloth and cord. Some cords hold fresh clay lumps still drying, stamped and neat. The system is visible everywhere, which makes the missing tools feel even sharper. On the table, the wooden tray shows where the stones should rest, smoothed and hollowed by years of habit. Next to it lies an empty cord. It's not loosened. Seeing it is strangely intimate, like a familiar bracelet without its charm. Hands search carefully. A pouch is turned out. Small items tumble onto the wood, a bone pin, a pebble, a bit of wax. No seal stone. Shoulders tighten, not in anger, but in responsibility. Your mind tries to sprint ahead, inventing villains and disasters, because that's what minds do when they want to feel useful. You refuse the performance. You take one slow, horse deep breath and widen your attention instead of narrowing it. You look down. The floor is packed earth, swept clean, but not perfect. Near the table, a dusting of tiny clay crumbs. A faint scuff curves toward the doorway, someone pivoting quickly. Another scuff continues out into the lane. Not proof. Direction. Outside, the group keeps movements contained, the way people do when they're trying not to let worry echo through a city. Because panic inside walls is louder than panic on an open plain. You can almost feel the ripple they're trying to prevent. Bakers counting loaves twice, weavers tucking thread away, grooms patting horses too hard, guards letting hands rest longer on bronze. The seal stones aren't just objects. They're trust made physical. An older figure, one of the city's quiet counters, the kind who knows how many jars should be where, makes a small, decisive gesture from table to lane. Retrace steps. Find what was misplaced before suspicion writes its own story. People move immediately. They check the shelf, the pegs, beneath a bench where cords might snag. Fingers trace cracks in stone. Eyes peer into dust where sunlight falls in a narrow strip. The search is quick but careful, almost tender, because everyone would rather recover a mistake than accuse a neighbor. You follow, using the same patient eyes you used under the market awnings and beside the looms. You skin the ground without drama. Troy gives you small details and expects you to respect them. The trail leads into a narrow passage where shade cools your skin. The smell of grain fades, replaced by sun-warmed stone. A thin ribbon of bread smoke drifts past and anchors you, a reminder that the city still functions even when a vital tool goes missing. At a junction where 3 lanes meet, the group slows. The older figure turns the head slowly, weighing memory, toward the market where pouches open and close, toward the workshops where oil slicks fingers, toward courtyards where cords catch on door frames. You feel attention gather like a held breath. And you realize, in the most ordinary way, that you're part of the solution now, not by heroics, but by staying calm enough to notice. The search begins in earnest, and the day's light suddenly feels like it has a job, to reveal what was misplaced, to restore the mark, and to let Troy exhale again. You let the search pause in the crossroads without letting it turn into a story about betrayal. Troy doesn't need that kind of entertainment. The city needs a system, and luckily it already has one, quiet, stubborn, and a little bit obsessed with proof. You follow the older counter away from the lanes and toward the administrative rooms where order is made visible. The air changes as you approach, less sun, more cool shadow, more the dry smell of clay and reed. You pass a doorway where the light thins into a calm, indoor dusk. Inside, the floor is smoother, packed and swept, and the sound of the city dulls as if someone placed a hand over a drum. This is a place designed for thinking, not shouting. A counting room sits tucked behind storage spaces, close enough to smell grain but separate enough to keep ink. Well, not ink exactly, dry and reliable. Shelves line the walls. On them rest bundles of clay tablets wrapped in cloth, stacks of small tokens, coils of cord, and lumps of sealing clay kept covered so they don't dry out too fast. The room feels like a quiet animal den of bureaucracy. Scribes sit low, bent over work surfaces, their posture steady in the way only practiced concentration can be. Reed pens rest in bowls. A small dish of water keeps clay workable. Fingers press marks into damp surfaces with controlled pressure. Too hard and you crack it. Too soft and the sign blurs. You watch the rhythm, press, lift, smooth, press again. It's oddly similar to weaving. Different material, same patience. You step softly, and nobody startles. They notice you, of course, but they don't make a show of it. In a city like Troy, scribes are used to people arriving with problems that want to become emergencies. Their job is to make the problem smaller by turning it into symbols. On a low table, a set of tokens lies in a neat line, little pieces of clay or stone shaped into simple forms. A cone, a sphere, a flat disk. You recognize the logic immediately, tangible counting. One shape stands for a quantity of grain, another for oil, another for livestock or cloth. It's the kind of system that keeps people honest because you can't forget a token without someone noticing a missing shape. Your modern brain, always trying to be helpful, thinks, primitive spreadsheet. Your ancient borrowed brain corrects you, reliable memory. A scribe gathers a handful of tokens, matches them to marks on a tablet, and then ties them into a small cloth pouch with cord. The cord is knotted in a specific way, tight enough to hold, simple enough to untie without tearing. Then a small lump of clay is pressed over the knot. Seal. Proof. The same concept as the storeroom jars, just scaled to information instead of food. You move closer to a shelf where seal impressions are kept, little clay bits stamped with symbols. Some are cracked, some intact, all preserved like tiny fossils of trust. You notice the repeated motifs: spirals, rosettes, a bird shape, a stepped line. Patterns you've already seen in woven cloth, echoed now in official marks. Troy's identity doesn't live in one place. It repeats itself until it becomes hard to forget. The older counter gestures, small, sharp, toward a tablet laid out on a mat. The tablet's surface is covered in tidy impressions and marks, each one placed like a careful footstep. Your eyes follow the lines the way they followed scuffs and dust earlier. This is the same search, just in a different medium. You focus on what matters. When were the seal stones last used? For which jars? Which storeroom? Which cord? In your mind, you can almost hear the rope at the well singing softly, reminding you to keep steady. You breathe like the horses did, slow, deep, and let the room's quiet organize you. You scan the table where sealing clay is kept. The clay is kneaded smooth, damp under a cloth, ready to be pressed. Nearby is a wooden board with faint imprints, practice stamps. Some are crisp. Some are smudged, as if someone stamped too quickly or lifted the stone at a bad angle. Your gaze lingers on the smudged ones. Smudges are human. Smudges are where panic starts. A scribe's hands slide a tablet aside to reveal another beneath it. This one holds a list: goods moving in, goods moving out, recorded with marks that look simple until you realize how much structure they contain. A certain mark appears beside a note about a jar of oil. Another beside a note about barley. The notes don't read like poetry. They read like survival. You notice a little irregularity, a set of entries about fresh seals being made, then a pause, then a later entry noting, seal replaced, for a jar that had been opened for inspection. The timing catches your attention, the way a loose thread catches your fingertip. Inspection. Replacement. That means seal stones were handled, possibly moved. You follow the chain, because Troy's systems are built like braided cord. One strand leads to another. A small basket of cords sits in the corner, each cord tied and labeled with simple tags. Some tags are clay discs with marks. One disc bears a spiral you recognize from the shrine area, a motif that's been following you like a sleepy echo. You remember the oil scent on bronze, the ash bowls, the quiet insistence that readiness is maintained. Inspection fits. Maintenance fits. Human error fits too, inconveniently. You look at the shelves again and notice something you didn't at first: a drying rack near the back, where newly stamped clay lumps sit hardening. The rack holds several fresh seals, softened at the edges, still slightly darker with moisture. The impressions on them are crisp enough to make you inhale a little through your nose, pleased by the neatness. Your brain, apparently, enjoys order when it's not being forced. On the edge of the rack sits a small cloth pouch. It's plain, tied loosely, as if someone set it down with the intention of picking it up again in a moment. The knot is the kind you make when you're halfway through a task and you're sure you'll be right back. The lie we all tell ourselves. The older counter moves toward it, careful, as if the pouch might bite. Fingers hover, then lift it gently. The pouch has weight, small weight, but real. Something solid inside. The room's tension tightens for a heartbeat. then steadies again. Nobody rushes. Nobody celebrates too early. Troy knows better. The pouch is placed on the table near the clay board. The knot is loosened slowly, because if you're going to restore trust, you do it with visible care. Inside, partly concealed in shadow, partly revealed by a slant of light, are small, smooth objects, seal stones, their faces carved with the city's marks. You feel your shoulders drop so hard it's almost comical. There it is. Not stolen. Not vanished into conspiracy. Simply moved, used, set down on a drying rack, and forgotten for the length of one anxious hour. The most ancient of all plot twists, a human being was tired. You take a slow breath and let the room's air fill the places panic tried to occupy. You remember the market's weights, the way trust can wobble in teaspoons. You remember the loom's steady beat, the way patterns hold stories without shouting. You remember the horses leaning into a brush, trusting calm hands. Now you remember this. Even the strongest walls can't protect a city from simple forgetfulness, so the city builds systems, and then forgives the systems when they slip. But the work isn't finished. The seal stones are found, yes, but the question remains, how did they travel from storeroom table to drying rack without anyone noticing? That answer matters too, not for blame, but for prevention. You glance toward the doorway and imagine the path, through lanes, along the inner wall, past narrow stairs where dust collects in corners. If someone carried them in a pouch, there may be traces, footprints, scuffs, a sprinkle of clay crumbs, tiny clues still waiting in the sunlit dust outside. You step back from the table and let the scribes return to their calm marks. The crisis has shrunk into something manageable, a mistake, a lesson, a route to retrace. You turn toward the door, ready to follow that route, because Troy is about to show you the quiet poetry of investigation, footprints in dust, not swords in air. You step out of the counting room with the seal stones safe again, and the daylight hits your face like a gentle correction. See, the world is still here. The city didn't collapse. Nobody burst into flames of accusation. Troy simply kept breathing. The problem has shrunk into its true size. A misplaced pouch, a tired hand, a system that worked because people cared enough to notice it was wobbling. But you don't let yourself float away on relief. Relief is lovely, but prevention is better. The older counter's quiet urgency remains, soft, steady, practical. Find the path the pouch traveled. Learn where attention slipped. Tighten the routine so the city doesn't waste another hour vibrating with needless suspicion. In a place built on walls and proof, even small gaps matter. So you return to the lanes with your eyes widened and your mind narrowed in a good way. The narrowness of focus, not fear. You head along the route between storerooms and counting spaces, but you choose the edges, the inner wall's shadow, the tighter stairways, the corners where dust settles and footprints linger longer. The cyclopean stones run beside you like a massive spine, their faces rough and sun-warmed. Up close, they feel less mythic and more intimate. Hand-height textures, chisel scars softened by time, tiny plants clinging to seams like stubborn little prayers. The city is busier now, but your attention stays quiet. You move like someone who doesn't want to disturb the surface of water. You scan the ground, because the ground is where truth leaves its faint signatures. Dust lies in thin layers along the base of walls, gathered where sweeping misses. Near a step, you see a faint scuff. heel turned, weight shifted. The mark is shallow, but it curves in a direction that fits the story your eyes are building, from storeroom toward the administrative rooms. Not proof yet. Just alignment. You keep walking. A narrow stair rises along the inner wall, cut into stone with shallow, worn treads. You climb slowly. The wall to your left holds heat. The air to your right is cooler, shaded by buildings. The stair smells faintly of damp stone and old smoke. You imagine how many people have climbed these steps carrying something important. Messages, jars, bundles, a child half asleep on a hip. Today it was a pouch of seal stones. A small weight. A big consequence. Halfway up, you spot a pale smear on one tread, dry clay, rubbed thin. It's easy to miss. It's the kind of thing your modern eyes would dismiss as dirt. But you've spent a day with Troy, and you know dirt tells stories. You crouch and look closer. The smear has tiny ridges, like clay was pressed and then scraped. A crumb sits in a crack at the step's edge, sheltered from sweeping. It's brittle. It breaks into dust if you touch it. You don't touch it. You just let it be evidence. You climb the rest of the stair and emerge onto a narrow walkway running along the inner wall's line. From here, you can see down into courtyards over reed roofs, across lanes where people move with baskets and tools. The view is less grand than the Scaean Gate's overlook, but more intimate. This is where the city's daily movement becomes patterns. This is where you can see how routine is a form of defense. You follow the walkway. The stone under your feet is smoother here, worn by patrol steps and work steps. The wall's top edge is rough, catching your fingertips if you trail them along it. Sunlight falls in bright rectangles where the walkway opens, then shifts into shade where towers cast their cool shadows. Your body stays calm. The height doesn't make you dizzy. The wall feels like a handrail for your nervous system. Along the base of a tower, you find more dust gathered in a crescent. In it, a set of shallow impressions. Someone paused here. Turned. Shifted weight. The marks aren't sharp enough to identify a person, but they are clear enough to suggest a moment of hesitation. You picture it, a worker carrying the pouch, climbing the stair, reaching the walkway, thinking, "I'll take this to the drying rack," then something interrupts. A call. A request. A thought. And in that tiny gap, the pouch becomes, "I'll set it down for a second." You continue. Below, a courtyard spreads out where cloth hangs on lines. The cloth flutters gently, and you remember the loom's beat, the dyer's steam. Above, the wall stones hold warmth, and you remember the shrine's oil gleam. Troy is not separate experiences. It's one braided rope, each strand pulling on the others. You descend a different set of steps, narrower, tucked between walls. Here the air is cooler and still. The dust is thicker, untouched in the corners. You scan for clay crumbs, and you find them, tiny pale flecks near the bottom, like someone brushed a hand against a wall and left a faint trail. The crumbs cluster near a doorway that leads toward the counting rooms. The story tightens. Pouch carried, clay crumbs shed, steps climbed, pause in the tower's shade, pouch set down near a drying rack. But you want more than a story. You want the exact moment. You walk toward the drying rack area you saw in the counting room, the sheltered place where fresh seals harden. Outside the administrative space, There's a small open patch where sunlight warms the ground and a breeze can pass through to help clay dry evenly. The drying rack itself is simple, a wooden frame with slats, elevated so air moves under it. It sits near a wall for stability, but not pressed against it, because moisture needs to escape. You look at the ground around the rack. There, in the dust, is a faint oval imprint, like the base of a small pouch or basket rested for a moment. The impression is shallow, but it's there. Beside it, a streak where something was dragged slightly, cloth shifting, perhaps, as someone set it down and then nudged it into shade. Your chest loosens again, not with relief this time, but with quiet satisfaction. Evidence doesn't need to shout. It only needs to exist. You stand still and let your mind reconstruct the scene with tenderness rather than blame. A worker comes here with the seal stones, intending to stamp fresh clay seals. They do it. They set the pouch down. Maybe someone asks them for a quick check on another tablet. Maybe a child runs through. Maybe a pot boils over in a nearby room. The worker thinks, "I'll be right back." They leave. The pouch waits. Then the next person arrives and sees seals drying, assumes the stones are elsewhere, and continues with their own task. Routine swallows the gap. Then, later, the storeroom table is empty, and the city's trust system hiccups. It's almost funny, in a quiet way. Not because the problem was trivial, but because it is so deeply human. Troy has walls built by genius and strength, and still the biggest disruption today came from someone setting something down and forgetting. You can't build a cyclopean wall high enough to keep that out. You imagine the older counter returning here with you, seeing this, and making a small change, a hook for the pouch. A rule that seal stones never leave the tray except in hand. A designated spot with a bright mark. Tiny adjustments that prevent big ripples. The city will absorb the lesson the way it absorbs smoke, the way it absorbs footsteps, the way it absorbs centuries. You rest your palm briefly on the wall stone. It is warm now, sun-fed, steady. You let that steadiness move into you. Your mind, which so often wants to race and accuse and predict disaster, feels calmer. You've seen how problems can be solved without spectacle, how trust can be repaired with method, how stone can teach patience. You step away from the drying rack and begin walking back toward the lanes, knowing the next part of this day will not be about searching, but about closing the loop, returning to the gatekeepers, restoring routine at dusk, letting the city's evening rituals settle everyone again. The Scaean Gate waits above, and the day is already leaning toward late light. By late afternoon, Troy's light turns honeyed. Shadows lengthen and soften. The city's edges blur just a little, like everything is being tucked in. Heat lifts from stone in slow breaths. Smoke from cooking fires becomes sweeter, less sharp, as if even the flames are tired. And you feel it in your own body, the day's work, walking, watching, searching, settling into a pleasant heaviness. You begin your climb back toward the Scaean Gate, not because you're chasing drama, but because you're drawn to the city's habits. Morning showed you how Troy feeds itself. Midday showed you how Troy repairs itself. Evening will show you how Troy closes itself, how it becomes a sealed jar of safety, stamped and proven. The route upward is familiar now. The stones that felt intimidating on your first night now feel like old acquaintances, still enormous, still unimpressed by you, but somehow comforting in their refusal to change. The inner wall runs beside you like a patient guardian. As you climb, you pass doorways where people pause to look up at the sky, gauging how much daylight remains. A child runs past with a bundle of reeds, feet kicking up dust. A woman shakes a cloth on a line, and the cloth snaps once like a soft punctuation mark, then settles. You reach the narrower corridor that leads to the gate, and the air cools again. The scent of oil becomes more noticeable here. Hinges and bars and leather, all maintained for the moment ahead. It's the same oil smell from the shrines, the same protective sheen from bronze, the same quiet insistence. We are ready, even when we are tired. At the gate's inner approach, you see the evening routine gathering itself. Not in a crowd, not in a loud assembly, but in small purposeful movements. A pair of guards checks the posts where beams rest. A hand runs along a groove in stone, clearing grit so a bar can slide without catching. Someone tests the hinge with a gentle push, listening for a squeak that would signal neglect. Everything is done with calm precision, like a bedtime ritual for a city: wash, check, settle, secure. The sky beyond the gate is still bright, but the sun has begun to lower toward the plain. Light spills across the landscape in wide amber sheets. From the overlook, you can see the world opening outward: fields, paths, distant water, the faint line of the sea holding the horizon. The view is as vast as it was at night, but the mood is different. Now the plain looks less mysterious and more exposed. The city's walls feel even more necessary, because daylight shows you everything that could move across that open space. You watch the gatekeepers' bodies, the way they stand. Not tense, grounded. Feet set in positions learned over years. Hands resting near straps and bronze, not in threat, but in readiness. Their attention is soft but continuous, like a candle flame sheltered from wind. They scan the plain, then scan the inner passage, then scan the mechanisms. Their gaze is not hunting. It's caring. Near the gate, a small shelf holds sealing clay covered with cloth, cords coiled neatly, and now restored, the seal stones in their rightful place. You notice a new detail. The stones sit not casually, but arranged with deliberate spacing, as if someone already took the day's lesson and turned it into a small change. A hook has been set near the tray, or at least a cord loop placed where a pouch can hang. It's subtle, but it's there. Troy doesn't waste a mistake. Troy harvests it. The closing begins gradually, with no sudden moment that screams, "Now!" It's a sequence. A beam is lifted and tested, its weight handled by more than one set of hands. The beam slides into its slot with a sound that is deeply satisfying, a low wooden thunk that lands in your chest like certainty. Another beam follows. Then a bar. The gate's mouth narrows, not visually, but psychologically. The city's openness folds inward. A cart that has been waiting outside is allowed through, guided smoothly. The driver's posture relaxes as wheels pass the threshold. Once inside, the cart is not a visitor anymore. It is part of Troy's interior life. The gatekeepers don't celebrate this. They simply note it and return to their work. Safety is not a party here. It's a practice. You notice how many tiny checks are built into the routine. A hand checks the beam's placement. Another checks a rope tie. Someone glances at the ceiling tray again, then at the storeroom direction, as if mentally linking the gate's closure to the city's internal proof systems. The day's missing sealstones echo here, not as a lingering fear, but as a reminder that systems are only as strong as attention. The light continues to soften. The sun's edge dips lower. The plain beyond the walls becomes a wash of gold and shadow. A bird crosses the sky, a dark shape gliding, then disappearing toward the distant water. The world feels wide, beautiful, and indifferent. Troy feels warm, contained, deliberate. You breathe in and notice your breath is slower now, deeper. The city's evening ritual is calming you the way the loom's rhythm did, the way the horse's breathing did. Repetition is a kind of medicine. It tells your mind, you've done this before. You can do it again. Nothing has to be invented at midnight. A final bar is set. The gate's mechanisms settle into place like a jaw closing, firm but not angry. The sound of it is not loud, but it has gravity. A city's security doesn't need fireworks. It needs a quiet click that says, inside is inside, outside is outside, and tonight we sleep with that boundary held. Torches are lit along the inner passage, their flames bending slightly in the evening breeze. The torchlight paints the stone amber again, just like your first night, and you feel the loop closing, night to morning to afternoon to dusk, each layer adding to the city's texture inside you. The Scaean Gate's overlook, once a place of starry wonder, becomes now a place of procedural comfort. The same view, different meaning. You linger a moment longer, watching the watchers. Their eyes keep moving. Their posture stays steady. Their work is quiet enough that it almost disappears, which is exactly how good protection works. You don't notice it until you need it. And if it's done well, you rarely need it. You turn away from the overlook and begin to descend again into the upper city's warm lanes, feeling the gate's closure behind you like a gentle weight. Troy has sealed itself for the night, not in fear, but in care. Inside the walls, fires will glow, bread will cool, cloth will fold, horses will doze. And somewhere, the seal stones will sit in their place, proof restored, trust restamped. The city is ready to sleep. And slowly, so are you. You descend from the gate with dusk draped over the city like a soft cloak. Torchlight has begun to bloom in small pockets, doorways, corners, niches, turning stone into warm amber and making shadows look less like threats and more like quiet companions. The air cools. Smoke thins. The day's edges blur. Troy's evening isn't an ending so much as a careful folding. And there's one last fold to complete. The seal stones need to return to the storeroom table, their proper home near cords and clay, so the city's proof system is whole again, not just in principle, but in practice. The gate is closed. The city is sealed from the outside. Now it needs to feel sealed on the inside too, which is a strangely tender thought. Safety isn't just walls. It's routines that click back into place. You make your way through lanes lit by torches that hiss softly when wind brushes them. The sound is like a whispered, shh, repeated everywhere. People move more slowly now, carrying bowls, folding cloth, ushering children indoors. A dog curls on a threshold. A cat appears in a patch of light, blinks at you like you're a questionable life choice, then disappears into shadow. The city is settling into itself. The storeroom entrance waits in its familiar shade, cool and dry. The smell of grain greets you again, barley, wheat, dried legumes, an earthy scent that feels like stability. Inside, the jars sit in their orderly rows, their rounded bellies catching torchlight and soft arcs. Cloth covers their mouths. Cords bind them. Clay seals, stamped and drying, cling to knots like small pale moons. The wooden tray where the seal stones belong sits on its table, and you feel a small satisfaction in seeing it empty and ready, like a bed made, waiting for someone to finally lie down. The day's tension, which had flared so quickly when those stones vanished, feels distant now, almost unreal, as if it happened in another city. But you don't forget it. You don't want to. You set the stones down, carefully, deliberately, with visible respect. Not because you're performing for anyone, but because the act itself matters. Each stone finds its place in the worn hollow of the tray, snug and familiar. Spiral, rosette, bird, stepped line. The motifs you've been seeing all day settle into their rightful order, and something in your chest settles too. Proof has returned to its cradle. The sealing clay sits nearby under a damp cloth. A hand lifts the cloth edge slightly to check the clay's moisture, soft enough to press, firm enough to hold a mark. Another hand adjusts the cords hanging from pegs, separating them so they don't tangle. The system is being reset, not with fanfare, but with careful touch. It's like watching someone rethread a loom after a snag, patient, precise, unembarrassed by the fact that snags happen. You take a slow breath and look around the storeroom with fresh eyes. The jars are not just containers, they're agreements. Each seal says, "This jar was closed at this time by this hand under this authority." Each stamped mark is a handshake in clay. The missing seal stones weren't just missing tools. They were a temporary tear in that handshake. And now, with the stones back, the handshake is restored. You notice, quietly, that a new rule is already being born. The stones are placed not only in the tray but also tied to it with a thin cord looped through a small hole in the wood, an extra precaution. Or perhaps a small peg has been set beside the tray for the pouch to hang from, visible and impossible to ignore. Troy doesn't lecture itself. It adjusts itself. That is how it survives. The person who misplaced the pouch arrives, subtle, careful, posture slightly smaller. You recognize the shape of apology even without words. It's in the way they don't rush forward, the way their hands stay close to their body, the way they move as if trying not to disturb anything else. They glance at the tray, at the stones now resting there like sleeping animals, and you can almost feel the relief in their spine. No one shames them. No one turns it into a lesson delivered with cruelty. The older counter's face remains calm, and the calm is the lesson. In a city built for conflict, the most radical act is refusing to manufacture more conflict than necessary. The mistake is real. The ripple was real. But the response is measured, like a gate bar sliding into place, firm, functional, not angry. You watch the next sealing happen, because that is how closure becomes real. A cord is tied around a jar's cloth cover, not tightened with practiced fingers. A lump of damp clay is pressed over the knot. The seal stone is chosen, spiral, perhaps, and pressed firmly into the clay. The impression appears crisp, beautiful in its plainness. The stone lifts away, leaving proof behind. The clay is left to dry. The jar is secure again. And you feel Troy exhale. Not as a dramatic gust, not as a triumphant release, but as a subtle easing in the room. Shoulders lower. Movements become smoother. The air seems lighter. It's astonishing how much weight a small missing object can add to a city, and how quickly that weight can vanish when order returns. Your own mind recognizes the pattern immediately. You, too, can be thrown into tension by something small, an unread message, a forgotten task, and you, too, can come back to calm by doing one simple corrective action. You find the thing. You put it where it belongs. You breathe. The torchlight flickers, and shadows dance on jar bellies. The smell of grain feels warmer now, less like a resource under protection and more like a promise. There will be bread tomorrow. There will be porridge. There will be meals in bowls that clink softly. The system holds. You step back, letting the storeroom return to its quiet hum. Outside, the city's evening deepens. The Scaean Gate is closed. The watch is set. Fires glow behind reed roofs. Somewhere, a loom has stopped for the night, threads resting. Somewhere, a horse shifts its weight in sleep, breathing slow. Somewhere, a bronze surface cools, oiled and ready for tomorrow's hands. You leave the storeroom with the sense of a loop completed, not a heroic arc, but a human one. A day that began with walls and wonder, moved through water and bread, dipped into fear and proof, and returned to order without breaking anyone. Troy has taught you, quietly, that strength isn't only in stone. It's in restraint. It's in repair. It's in the decision to be calm enough to fix what's fixable. You walk back into the torchlit lanes and let the city's hush wrap around you. The problem is resolved. The misunderstanding has dissolved like smoke into night air. And the calm that remains feels earned, not accidental, built, maintained, and now gently restored. Night returns the way it always does, patient, inevitable, and oddly kind. Troy's torchlight becomes the city's new constellations, scattered along lanes and tucked into niches like little held breaths. The air cools further. Smoke thins into a faint veil that smells of wood and cooked grain. Above, the sky deepens until stars appear again, sharp and steady, as if they never left and were simply waiting for you to look up. With the steel stones back where they belong and the storeroom's proof system restored, the city's inner tension has quieted. You can feel it. The lanes carry fewer quick footsteps, fewer urgent pivots. Doors are closed. Cloth curtains are drawn. The city is folding itself inward, becoming private, becoming soft. And your body, after a day of climbing, watching, searching, listening, wants the same thing. You walk without a goal at first, letting your feet choose familiar routes. The stones underfoot feel cooler now. The cyclopean wall, which held warmth and afternoon sun, releases it slowly into night air. You pass courtyards where looms are still, their threads resting like paused music. You pass ovens whose coals glow faintly under ash, the smell of bread lingering like a memory you can almost taste. You pass a corner where a dog sleeps curled tight, nose under tail, and you resist the urge to stand guard over it like a sentimental idiot. The city doesn't need your guarding. It needs your quiet presence. Your path bends toward the bronze war shrines again, almost without decision. Maybe it's the way torchlight makes bronze look alive. Maybe it's the way the oil scent has become a thread through your day, at hinges, on tools, on sacred surfaces. Maybe it's simply that you've learned the shrines aren't about war as spectacle. They're about steadiness, which is what your mind has been craving all along. The first shrine you reach sits in its familiar alcove. By torchlight, the ash bowl looks deeper, darker, like a small night sky contained. The ash itself is pale in the center, almost glowing where light touches it. The oil jar sits beside it, stoppered, reflecting a tiny, distorted torch flame. You notice a new offering, a small piece of bronze, perhaps a rivet or a buckle, placed with care, as if someone wanted to say, quietly, keep this strong. You stand at the threshold again, letting the hush work on you. There's a strange comfort in the fact that this space exists at all. A designated corner where people can admit fear without being weak. A place where readiness is acknowledged as a craft, like weaving or baking. You think of the armorer's quarter, the ringing metal like rain, and realize the shrine is its softer echo. Where the workshop shapes bronze, the shrine shapes courage. A breeze slides through and lifts the torch flame briefly. The light flickers across the shrine's surfaces, and you catch small glints, a smear of oil, a polished edge, the rounded lip of the ash bowl. These details feel as intimate as the loom's repeating pattern. Troy is made of repetitions, water carried, bread baked, cloth woven, gates closed, seals pressed. The shrines sit among those repetitions, reminding people that courage, too, is something you practice. You move to the larger shrine near the edge of the armorer's quarter. The dented helmet still sits there, its bruises honest, its bronze skin catching torchlight in warm pulses. The cloth beneath it holds faint stains of oil, darker now in the night. You can smell it more strongly, and the scent pulls you backward through the day like a gentle hook, the morning well's cold breath, the market's reed shade and measured scoops, the moment of missing sealstones when suspicion tried to bloom, the calm in the counting room when symbols shrank the problem into solvable size. You remember the clay crumbs on the stair tread, the faint pouch imprint near the drying rack. You remember how stone steadied you as you traced the path. And you realize the shrines are doing the same work now, giving your mind something solid to rest against. A figure passes quietly, pauses for a moment near the shrine, then moves on. No loud gestures. No performance. Just a brief alignment of body and breath. It's like watching someone check a door locked before bed, not because they think the world is ending, but because they want to sleep without their brain inventing monsters. Troy doesn't pretend monsters don't exist. It simply refuses to feed them. You walk along the row of niches, letting your eyes take in the small offerings. A twist of leather, a bead, a bit of wool dyed smoky blue, a tiny carved token. Each one is a whisper of a person's life. The offerings aren't about bribing gods. They're about acknowledging limits, about admitting in the quietest way that humans can only do so much, and sometimes you need help from systems, from community, from whatever you believe holds the world together. The night deepens. Somewhere, a distant hammer rings once, maybe someone finishing a task late, maybe just a tool set down. The sound is faint, but it travels through stone and air like a last heartbeat before sleep. It reminds you of the armorer's rain song, now softened to a single drop. You find yourself thinking about the Scaean Gate again, the way the bars slid into place at dusk with that satisfying thunk. The gate's closure felt like a city exhaling. The seal stones returning to their tray felt like a room exhaling. And now, standing here, you feel something inside you exhale too, something that has been clenched for no good reason, gripping the day as if the day might escape. You let your shoulders drop. You let your jaw unclench. You let your tongue rest in your mouth instead of pressing against your teeth like it's trying to hold your life together. You don't need to hold it together here. Troy is holding itself together. You are allowed to be a witness, not a controller. The shrines glow softly in torchlight, and for a moment they look like little islands of warm metal in a sea of dark stone. You think of how the city is built, cyclopean walls outside, soft rituals inside. Huge protection and small care. Strength and gentleness braided. You turn away from the shrine slowly, carrying their hush with you. The lanes ahead are quieter now, more private. The city is nearly asleep. The watch remains steady and silent, but most bodies have settled into straw and blankets. You can feel the pull of rest, the kind that doesn't demand, only invites. And you know the end is close, not as a sudden stop, but as a long tapering. Soon you will walk beneath the cyclopean walls again, not arriving, but leaving. Soon you will look back one last time and carry Troy's calm craft with you into the softest part of night. For now, you walk through torchlit stone with the oil scent in your memory, the well's rope song in your ears, the loom's beat in your breath, and the horse's slow exhale in your chest. The city has woven itself into you, and you are ready, finally, to let yourself rest. You walk as if you're trying not to wake the city. Your steps land softly on packed earth and worn stone, the sound swallowed by night the way a blanket swallows light. Troy's torch constellations thin as you move toward the outer routes, and the lanes become quieter, more private. Doorways sealed with cloth, courtyards dark, hearths reduced to coals breathing under ash. The air tastes cooler now, clean and faintly smoky, and every breath feels like it has more room. You pass the places that held you today, and they pass through you in return. A courtyard where looms once beat their steady thump now sits still, the threads slackened and rest like a song paused mid-note. In the dim, you can just make out the wooden frame shapes, patient and waiting, and you feel the rhythm in your chest anyway. Inhale, exhale, because your body learned it and doesn't want to unlearn it. Farther on, a lane carries the lingering scent of bread, even though the ovens are quiet now. It's not a sharp smell anymore, just warmth remembered, grain and smoke braided into comfort. You skirt the market area, now empty under its reed awnings. The canopy hangs in darkness like a sleeping animal, and the stalls have been cleared, baskets stacked away, weights tucked into pouches. In the quiet, the whole place seems gentler, as if daytime busyness was just a costume it wore to do its work. You think of measured scoops, of honest hands, of the small ways trust is maintained without speeches. The war shrines sit in their niches, torchlight flickering across bronze and ash. You don't stop this time. You simply acknowledge them with the calm you've been carrying, like a silent nod to the part of yourself that learned how to put fear down for a moment, and pick it up again in a smaller shape. The oil scent rises faintly as you pass, soft, familiar, almost reassuring. It follows you like a thread, tying the city's hidden corners together. You move toward the inner face of the cyclopean wall. Up close, the stones are darker now, their surfaces cool where they weren't warmed by sun, their textures more pronounced in torchlight. The blocks look less like architecture and more like geology, mountain chunks that decided to align. You trail your fingertips along a seam between two stones and feel the tiny unevenness, the grit, the age. The wall is a kind of patience made visible. It doesn't explain itself. It doesn't reassure you with words. It simply stands there and proves that lasting can be a real thing. A narrow passage opens ahead, guiding you toward the outer gate route. The corridor is cooler, the air still. Your breath sounds louder in your own ears, and you don't mind. There's a strange intimacy in hearing yourself exist. It makes you feel less scattered, less like a set of worries walking around in human shape. As you walk, the day's small crisis returns to you, not as tension, but as a lesson you can hold without bruising. The missing seal stones. The way worry tried to bloom into suspicion. The way calm method and careful checking dissolved it. You remember the drying rack's pouch imprint, the clay crumbs on stone steps, the counting room's quiet marks. It's almost funny now, in that tender way, how something so small can tilt a whole city's mood. And it's even more comforting how quickly it can be corrected when people choose restraint over accusation. You emerge into a broader space where the path angles toward the Scaean Gate route, and for a moment you glance upward, toward that high throat of stone where the world opens beyond the walls. Even now, with the gate secured for night, you can sense the overlook above, the place where wind moves freely and the plain spreads wide. You remember standing there the first night, feeling horizons rearrange your mind. You remember returning at dusk, watching beams slide into slots with that deep wooden thunk of certainty. The gate feels like a heartbeat you've come to trust, open when it's time, close when it's time, never panicked, never sloppy. Down here, nearer the outer passage, the torches are fewer. Darkness thickens, but it's not threatening. It's simply night doing what night does. Somewhere, a guard's silhouette shifts in the corner of your vision, steady, unhurried, present. The city's watch continues, like a hand resting lightly on a sleeping shoulder. You reach the inner threshold where the cyclopean wall curves, guiding you toward the way out. The stones here are immense, but you no longer feel dwarfed. You feel held. You feel like you learned the city's language, routine, care, proof, patience. You understand now that Troy is not one mood. It's many layers laid over one another, water's cold breath and oven warmth, loom rhythm and hammer rain, market shade and gate wind, bronze oil and ash hush. You step through the last inner corridor, and the outside air touches you, cooler, sharper, carrying the faint salt suggestion from the distant sea. The stars are bright and steady, the same stars that watched you arrive. The plain beyond the walls lies open and dark, textured with silent shapes. The world looks wide again, indifferent again, beautiful again in that slightly intimidating way. You turn, because you need a last look back. The cyclopean walls rise behind you, massive and calm. Torchlight leaks from within in small golden seams, like the city is glowing through cracks in stone. The Scaean Gate sits higher, barely visible, but you can feel it as a presence, an eye, a hinge, a promise. For a moment, you imagine the city inside, jars sealed and proven, coals breathing under ash, cloth folded, horses dozing, bronze cooling with a thin sheen of oil, hands resting after a day of work that will never become famous in songs but will keep life intact anyway. You let that image settle in your chest like a warm stone. Then you turn back toward the dark plain, not lonely, not hurried. You walk away carrying something subtle, the knowledge that safety can be built, that mistakes can be corrected without cruelty, that calm can be practiced like a craft. The city doesn't come with you physically, but it leaves its rhythm in your breath, slow, steady, survivable. And the night, generous and quiet, begins to close around you like sleep. You let your steps slow even more now, as if the ground itself is gently asking you to soften. The air is cool against your cheeks, and it feels clean enough to rinse the day out of your thoughts. You breathe in, and it's like drawing in a little piece of starlight. You breathe out, and it's like letting the last tight knots inside you loosen, one by one. In your mind, Troy becomes less a city and more a set of calming textures: warm bread smoke, smooth worn stone, the faint slick scent of oil on bronze, the hush of ash in a bowl, the steady beat of a loom that you can almost hear even in silence. You don't need to hold on to every detail. You can let them drift, like cloth sinking into water, like dust settling after footsteps pass. Your shoulders feel heavier in a good way, the way they feel when you finally stop pretending you're fine. Your jaw unclenches. Your eyelids grow warmer, softer. The stars above are steady and patient, and they don't demand anything from you, not answers, not plans, not tomorrow's energy. They simply exist, and that permission is strangely soothing. You imagine the cyclopean walls behind you as a boundary inside your own mind now, not to keep you trapped, but to keep you safe. Outside the wall, worries can wander and pace all they want. Inside the wall, you are allowed to rest. You are allowed to be unfinished. You are allowed to set things down and trust they will still be there when you return. Your breathing slows into a gentle pattern: inhale, pause, exhale, like water carried carefully, like gates closing at dusk, like a city settling into night. And with each breath, the images blur a little more, torches become soft dots, bronze becomes warm glimmers, the plain becomes a dark velvet sweep, and Troy becomes a distant, kindly presence that doesn't need you anymore because it never truly needed you to begin with. You feel yourself drifting, not falling. Drifting, as if sleep is a calm river and you're finally floating instead of fighting the current. And as you float, you let one last thought land softly: you did enough today. You can stop now. End of story. Sweet dreams.